Now, the two world major powers are coming together, and many experts are now calling this one of the most defining moments. What does this essentially mean? The Prime Minister's visit to the United States of America, and how is it essentially looking at a paradigm shift? We'll be joined by some guests joining us on This Is Exclusive, and not just that, also focus on what's really happening in the state of Manipur. All is not well. Questions are now being raised about N. Biren Singh and the way this has really panned out in the state of Manipur. We'll get you the ground reports, but up first, these are the headlines we are tracking for you at this hour. Prime Minister Modi departs for his first ever state visit to the US. Rousing reception awaits him in New York. In an exclusive interview with the Wall Street Journal, Prime Minister Modi says India and US share unprecedented trust. Prime Minister to meet over 2 dozen thought leaders during his visit to New York. UN gears up for the big Yoga Day celebration in the presence of Prime Minister Modi on 21st of June. Manipur continues to remain on the edge. Chief Minister N. Biren Singh urges Kuki and Meiteis to shun violence. Supreme Court dismisses Mamata government plea. Central forces will be deployed in Bengal. Washington DC is all set to roll out the red carpet for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Modi's left India today for his 5-day US visit, and he's expected to land at the Andrews Air Force Base in Washington around 1:30 this morning. Prime Minister Modi, during his visit to the US, will meet top Indian American CEOs. After that, he will lead the celebration marking the International Yoga Day at the UN headquarters on Wednesday. What we also know is that Prime Minister Modi will leave for Washington DC soon after concluding the yoga event, where US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will host a private dinner. In fact, not just that, there's much more lined up for Prime Minister Modi. But beyond the optics, what does this essentially mean between the two major world powers, and what essentially is going to change? Whether at all this has any impact on the global order, these are some aspects that will be looked into. Before we play out that report, I would also like to go across to my guest who's joining us on this broadcast. He's the president of India Foundation as well as a member of the RSS. Mr. Ram Madhav is going to be joining us on this broadcast. Putting this into perspective, because some of the experts are now calling that this could be one of the most defining moments. And why exactly is this going to be a defining moment for Prime Minister Modi as well as for the entire country? Joining us on this broadcast all the way from Israel is Mr. Ram Madhav. Thank you very much, Mr. Madhav, for joining us on This Is Exclusive on Republic TV. Let me straight away begin by asking you, in an editorial that you had written, you say that exceptional superiority on one side, romantic neutrality on the other, had kept the world's oldest and largest democracies at arm's length from each other. In the second half of the last century, historic mistrust dominated the strategic calculus. I want to understand from you, Mr. Ram Madhav, you've made multiple visits to the United States of America. You've had a lot of conversations with the key leaders, stakeholders. The sense that you get, why is it that you are calling this as one of the most defining moment, not just for Prime Minister Modi, but for the two world power?
Thank you, Shravan. Firstly, the 20-year effort that has gone into taking the US-India relations to next level has fructified under Prime Minister Modi's leadership. Today, our relationship has come of age. We are very strong and we are very mutually trusted. partners in our endeavors. The kind of reception that Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji is going to get in US, it stands a testimony to the fact that despite lot of negative propaganda, lot of false accusations, etc., the leadership of the US. Remember, when I say leadership of the US, I'm not just talking about President Biden or the Democrats who are in power. The bipartisan leadership of the US reposes full faith in this relationship. You referred to my article earlier. You know, the last 3-4 decades of the last century, the 20th century, were one of a lot of mistrust between our two countries. The American side were not very happy with the non-alignment stand that we took, and they supported countries like Pakistan. They then built strong relations with China. Our relations remained very hot and cold type of relationship in the last 3-4 decades of the last century. But come Vajpayee government, things started changing. Vajpayee was the first senior leader or the prime minister of the country to declare that US and India are natural allies. So from that point in year 2000 to 2023 today, this natural friendship has matured so much that today we are working as equals. We are equal partners today. That is the greatest achievement that has happened in the last 2 decades, greatest change that has happened in the 2 decades. Today, US and India are working shoulder to shoulder as equals. We are now seized of the global challenges, whether it is climate issues or the rise of China or the challenge and opportunity that is lying in the new technologies that we are going to face, like artificial intelligence or what they call as quantum computing, etc. So, as equals, we are going to discuss many issues in the. Starting with this visit hereafter. That is the most important, the great significance of this visit, I think.
Mr. Madhav, can I now also focus about the impact that it is essentially having on our neighbors? In fact, there was an opinion piece that was published by Global Times, and I would like to quote what a top diplomat from China had to say. In fact, they say that India's trade with the United States cannot replace its trade with China, nor can India replace China in the global supply chains. The more India exports to the United States, the more it needs to import from China. How do you essentially view the kind of statements that have come across from China, especially given the fact that when Prime Minister Vajpayee called this entire relationship between the United States of America as a natural ally, but at the same time we have seen over the years, over decades now, this entire arm's length distance that we have essentially made resulted in the West creating in Pakistan and China. Today, the response that is now coming in from China, especially when Prime Minister Modi has gone all out to ensure that this relationship is something that is time tested and it's going to pay dividends not just for both the nation but for every citizen of this nation.
Look, in a globalized world today, trade is one important component that will continue to connect countries. Arch rivals like US and China have strong trade ties today. Secretary Blinken was in China yesterday and day before. He held extensive talks. Even the US changed its position from complete delinking with China to what nowadays they describe as de-risking. Trade will continue to link us. That is not a bad thing. I mean, if today India were to depend for certain things in trade with China or China depending on India for certain imports, that should not be seen as anything bad. But India's larger, while geoeconomics will link us with many countries, but larger geostrategic interests lie in its relations with the democratic world. We are a big democratic country. We share certain values with certain countries in the world. That include countries like America. There can never be any kind of mutual understanding or mutual relationship with countries like China, which do not at all share this kind of worldview. They believe in a different kind of worldview. They are authoritarian in nature. They want to spread that kind of a world order in the world. There, our relationship with countries like the US, our partner countries in the Quad, or many countries in our own region, it differs. So trade standalone can be a thing that will probably continue or not continue. It depends on growing needs of each country. Today we are growing stronger. We are focusing on Make in India. That may probably reduce our reliance on some countries. But at the same time, with countries like the US, we have strong technological relationship growing, strong defense relationship growing, which we welcome. Certain trade relationships are out of compulsion. Certain relationships are what we want to grow. And Prime Minister's visit to US will help in taking forward those relationships which we want, we really look forward to. Like, for example, there is a likelihood of we finalizing or concluding a jet engines trade contract with the US during this visit of Honorable Prime Minister. And the critical and emerging technologies area also, we are likely to have a certain further, progress in the relationship. These are something that we want. There are relations which we depend on. One of them is our trade dependence on China.
Right. Mr. Madhav, can we also then focus right now as to the deliverables? What is it that we are really expecting that perhaps is going to really work this time for India, especially the position that we have taken? We are talking in the midst of a global war. We are talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, where India today, as the Prime Minister says, that India is not neutral. India is on the side of peace. Do you think somewhere down the line the West would be able to reconcile to this kind of positioning that has been taken by India, especially given the fact that they find themselves in a tizzy, especially India's position on Russia and Ukraine is concerned, and more importantly, time and again, the snide comments that have been made by the European nations as far as buying oil from Russia is concerned. All that put together, how do you see the reconciliation between India and US when it comes to Russia and Ukraine war?
As far as the US leadership is concerned, there is definite realization, and there is a very pragmatic approach that this US-India relationship need not be confined to geostrategic interests or need not be bogged down by our lack of convergence on certain geostrategic issues, which include the one that you referred to, the Ukraine war. So the realization on both sides is that we should build a very strong geo-economic bonding, geo-economic relationship. That has been the effort right from the time of Prime Minister Vajpayee or President Bush in US through different governments, including Dr. Manmohan Singh. And today, Prime Minister Modi also is pursuing that line that let us strengthen our geo-economic relationship. Let us take it to the next level so that we will all be in a position to promote peace in the world. What will be India's role? India's role will not be just as a net security provider. We are never, we are that way reticent about wars. We don't get into wars in other parts of the world. But we will be very happy to play a role as net peace provider. For us to emerge as a net peace provider in the most happening region, namely Indo-Pacific, we need to grow stronger. US-India relationship, especially the geo-economic significance of the relationship, is for strengthening India as a regional power, regional balancing power. In this region where we live today, the Indo-Pacific region, there are countries, there is China, there is Russia, there are other countries. India has the potential to play the balancing role in this region. That is where India further strengthening economically, defense-wise, will be in the larger interest. So in a second to refer to certain criticisms that we sometimes encounter, some call it a bad bet, etc., etc. My only answer is this relationship, at least from the point of view of our two leaders of both the countries, is not just something with respect to immediate issues. It is with respect to the larger interest of the mankind.
Mr. Ram Madhav, I'll just request you to stay on with us because I just want to quickly go across to my colleague Aishwarya, who's also reporting for us from US, to get us a sense from there. Perhaps you could also get a sense of what's really happening right now in the United States of America, given the fact that there is palpable excitement, not just on one side, I would say from both sides. The very fact that you have a state dinner, Aishwarya, that is going to be hosted for Prime Minister Modi, and then of course the lunch with the Secretary of State and of course the Vice President. Why don't you walk us through the itinerary of the Prime Minister and essentially what is it that the Indian government is really looking forward to, and then perhaps we'll take one last question from Mr. Ram Madhav.
Shawan, first and foremost, once the Prime Minister lands here in New York, all the important political bilaterals are scheduled in DC, but here in New York, there are going to be very, very important bilaterals with the business community. There is a massive yoga event on the North Lawns of UN, where Prime Minister alongside 1,300 dignitaries from across 36 countries in the world are going to be performing yoga there in UN, while more than 6,000 people, and this whole place of Times Square, if Surendra Rawat could give you a 360 view, will be taken over by the Indian diaspora so that more than 6,000 people can perform yoga on the International Yoga Day at Times Square. But more importantly, as he was just talking about geostrategy and geopolitics, Mr. Ram Madhav just mentioned, senior BJP leader, he just mentioned that India, and he's also written that a net peace provider rather than a net security provider. But he had also mentioned, Ram Madhavji, you had also mentioned that the word which was coined in the 2000 by the late Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and George W. Bush of natural allies, India and US being the natural allies, Prime Minister Modi seems to be implementing that. Prime Minister Modi, Shawan, seems to be implementing that term, natural allies between India and US. And China obviously is not liking it. That's why the statements coming in that India is being used by China, by the US. US is trying to balance the supply chain because China is not helping. India today holds, and that is what the sense is amid the Indian diaspora here in the US as well, that today Indian foreign policy holds the skill set to handle US separately, China separately, and Russia separately. And that is why, Shaban and Ram Madhavji, for the first time, and you know better than anyone, Ram Madhavji, that while India is the largest importer of Russian oil, the Indian Prime Minister for the first time is a state guest. Prime Minister Modi is a state guest in US. The only Prime Minister of India ever to be addressing the US Congress for the second time. And that in itself is a clear example of the Indian foreign policy. Ram Madhavji.
Right. Well, in fact, Aishwarya, why don't you take that question also?
There is an enormous importance attached to this
Mr. Ram Madhav, I
visit.
think so my colleague Aishwarya had a question for you.
Yes,
Yeah, please carry on.
I'm coming. Yes. So the President Biden and his team is according enormous importance to this visit. As I said, as Aishwarya also mentioned rightly, there is going to be a grand reception on the White House lawns, which will be attended by thousands of people from all walks of life from the US, and it will be comparable only to the visit by Pope Francis in 2015, when President Obama President Obama invited him to the White House. So this is going to be on that scale. Then again, secondly, the address to the US joint session of the US Congress. It's happening. The only second leader probably after Netanyahu is going to be Prime Minister Modi ji. It shows that even in spite of the factors that Aishwarya mentioned, that India taking the route of strategic autonomy on international strategic issues, on the question of Ukraine war, on the question of oil imports, on many other issues, the US recognizes that India is a big global power today. Its presence itself is very important for regional stability in the most happening region, namely the Indo-Pacific region. Now, that is the reason why, despite certain criticisms from very minor quarters, because one must remember that the joint session address that Prime Minister is going to do 2 days from now, is on the invitation of both the leaders of the Congress. One, the Democrat leader of the House, and the Republican leader of the Senate. Both leaders jointly invited Prime Minister. They sent out a letter to Prime Minister inviting him to address joint session. It shows that both the sides of the US political spectrum are today eagerly looking forward to engaging with India. So that shows how something that was started 20 years ago as natural allies has matured into a strong relationship as equals. I'm emphasizing on this word. Maybe some people may have reservations, but we are today acting as equals. Each understands the importance of the other.
Right. I think so. We seem to have lost the connection with Mr. Ram Madhav, but thank you very much, Mr. Ram Madhav, for joining us on this broadcast and putting this into perspective.
Right.
Shravan, because, take a quick question,
because what he was trying to say was very important.
Before I go across to you, Aishwarya.
Yeah, Shravan, right. Please.
Go ahead, Aishwarya, make your point, and then I'll also introduce Ambassador Sajjanar, who's joining us on this broadcast. Go ahead, Aishwarya.
No, my only point was that China will not like it. China is not liking it, and that's why, you see, China is trying to make all this hullabaloo that India is being used by the US. US wants to equate its supply chain by using India. But the reality is that India is right now equally placed between US and Russia, and China obviously is not liking it. But once again, as Ram Madhav and then the other leaders have been saying, who understand foreign policy better, that India today can handle US separately, China separately, and Russia separately, and that's the power of our foreign policy and our leadership. Back to you, Shravan.
Well, thank you very much, Aishwarya, for putting this into perspective as we continue with our live coverage from New York and then in Washington. Before that, let me just quickly introduce Ambassador Sajjanar, who's also joining us on this broadcast. Ambassador Sajjanar, as Mr. Ram Madhav was pointing out, that we are talking about two equals, and that perhaps is the significant change in the relationship which Prime Minister Vajpayee had said, natural allies. But there is a shift, a transitional change that we are really looking at this point in time. But what, according to you, is the defining moment? Because many are now already calling this entire, the state dinner, and of course the very fact that you have Prime Minister being hosted by the Secretary of State and the Vice President. It's a defining moment in the relationship between India and the United States of America. How do you see it? We seem to have lost the line with Ambassador Sajjanar. We'll try and fix that. If Aishwarya is there, we'll just go in for a quick check with him as to what's really expected in the next few hours, Aishwarya. The focus essentially would be on, of course, the bilaterals that are going to take place, but in terms of the deliverables are concerned too, we'll see what exactly is essentially going to be what they say that the relationship, how things have essentially been changing between the United States of America and as well as India. We'll play out a report in a short while from you to get a sense of the next 3 days. What is it that one is to expect, and how exactly has things really changed for both the countries? Stepping at a short break. On the other side, we continue with our rolling coverage.
We are here in a helicopter right over New York City. We are on an exclusive chopper ride. These are the visuals of Midtown Manhattan, that's Central Park. The Prime Minister Modi is going to be performing yoga on the North Lawns of the United Nations, while more than 4,000 people are going to be performing yoga in Central Park, a bird's eye view of Statue of Liberty. These are exclusive visuals which Republic Media Network is only to give you.
Republic has always stood for the nation. It has always prided in putting India first. But in the digital news ecosystem, in the way that it has functioned with impunity for decades, there are some and many who have done everything to oppose the nation, to go against Indian interests, to parrot an anti-India fake news narrative across the world through digital. It is time that we change it once and for all. So this July, it's digital first, nation first, republic first.
Nation first means no considerations apart from putting India first. Nation first at Republic means chasing this story and telling it as the facts tell you it is before the nation. Nation first is confrontation to dig out the truth and put it before the nation. Nation first means questioning and demanding accountability so as to uphold democracy. What does nation first mean to you? Send us your thoughts on video via WhatsApp on 73044343881 or upload it on your own social media handle with the hashtag #NationFirst. We'll take some of your videos on air and the sharpest responses will get limited edition Republic merchandise from us with a surprise.
Nation First means celebrating everything that defines us as Indians. Nation First at Republic is about taking pride in every victory of India and coming together in every moment of strife so we pull through as one. And Nation First is raising the pitch on the campaigns on behalf of the people. Nation First is exposing injustice no matter the cost. And what does Nation First mean to you? Send us your thoughts on video via WhatsApp on the number 73044343881. I'll repeat that, it's 73044343881, or you can even upload it on your social media handle with the hashtag #NationFirst. And we'll take some of those videos on air on Republic TV, and the sharpest responses from you, the viewer, will get limited edition Republic merchandise from us with a surprise.
Nation First at Republic is simply about putting India first. It is about putting Indians first. It is about putting Indian interests first. It is also about putting Indian forces first. It is about putting the tricolor first. What does Nation First mean to you? Send us your thoughts on video via WhatsApp on 73044343881 or upload it on your social media handle with the hashtag #NationFirst. We'll take some of your videos on air and the sharpest responses will get limited edition Republic merchandise.
We're in a helicopter right over New York City. We're on an exclusive chopper ride. These are the visuals of Midtown Manhattan, that's Central Park. The Prime Minister Modi is going to be performing yoga on the North Lawns of United Nations, while more than 4,000 people are going to be performing yoga in Central Park, a bird's eye view of Statue of Liberty. These are exclusive visuals which